A desperate young boy warns a mysterious blind girl not to eat a piece of cake, unaware her father is a reclusive billionaire who will change his life forever. Don't eat the cake. The rain hammered down on the glass roof of the grand atrium like 1,000 desperate fists, relentless and wild, each drop a tiny, frantic heartbeat against the panes. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the vast, high-ceiling ballroom for a split second before darkness swallowed it whole, leaving only the soft, flickering light of 100 ornate chandeliers to cast a golden glow upon the polished marble floors. He was cold, a deep, biting cold that had nothing to do with the storm raging outside, and everything to do with the hollow space in his stomach and the worn, threadbare fabric of his jacket. Leo stood in the shadows of a towering marble column, a ghost at the feast, his presence as unnoticed as the soft click of a latch on a distant door. He was supposed to be in the service corridors, waiting for his Aunt Maria to finish her shift cleaning the kitchens, but the allure of the warmth and the impossible scent of roasted duck and sweet pastry had pulled him through a heavy oak door left carelessly ajar. He watched the guests, women in shimmering gowns and men in crisp, dark suits, their laughter like the clinking of champagne flutes, bright and brittle. They moved with an easy grace, a confidence that came from never having known the gnawing anxiety of an overdue rent notice or the weary ache of a hungry night. Leo felt a familiar tightening in his chest, not of envy, but of a profound and unshakable loneliness. He was 10 years old and already felt a century weary. His world was one of quiet desperation, a fragile existence shared with his Aunt Maria in a cramped 2-room apartment where the walls were thin and the cupboards were often bare. His parents were a faded photograph on the mantelpiece, a sacred, tender memory of a car crash on a rain-slicked road 2 years prior that had shattered his universe. Maria worked 3 jobs, her hands always chapped, her eyes perpetually haunted by a weariness that cut Leo to the core. He tried to be small, to be no trouble, to fold his needs into the tiniest possible space so they wouldn't add to her burden. But the hunger was a relentless creature, a dull, thudding ache that was his constant companion. He watched a waiter glide by with a tray of miniature quiches, the buttery aroma so potent it made him feel dizzy. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. A single desperate thought splintered through his quiet resolve. Just one. No one would notice. But the thought was followed by a wave of shame so powerful it made him flinch. He was not a thief. He was his mother's son, and she had taught him dignity. He was his father's son, and he had taught him integrity. So he stayed in the shadows, a silent observer in a world that was not his. He was invisible. Then he saw them, a man and a young girl, moving through the crowd with a quiet purpose that set them apart from the glittering throng. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple dark sweater and trousers, a stark contrast to the impeccable tuxedos around him. There was a commanding stillness about him, an aura of power that no simple clothing could disguise. But it was his eyes that held Leo's attention. They were deep and shadowed, carrying a grief so raw and profound it seemed to absorb the light around them. The girl at his side was holding his hand, her face pale and angelic, framed by a cascade of dark curls. She wore a simple blue dress, and as she turned her head toward the sound of the orchestra, Leo realized her eyes, a stunning shade of violet, were unfocused. They were glistening but unseeing. She was blind. Her father leaned down, his voice a soft murmur, only for her, and she smiled, a pure, innocent expression that lit up her face like the sun breaking through a heavy fog. For a moment the man's haunted eyes softened as he looked at her, a flicker of tender, unbearable love that was so private, Leo felt he should look away. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this brief stolen glimpse into a stranger's soul, would change everything. The girl, Lily, tugged on her father's hand, her voice a soft melody. "Papa, Can I have some cake now? You promised. The man, Marcus, nodded, his gaze sweeping the room with a protective weariness. Of course, my love. Let's find you the most beautiful piece. They made their way toward the dessert table, a magnificent display of confectionery art, laden with towers of macarons, glistening fruit tarts, and cakes of every description. At the very center sat a masterpiece, a triple-layer chocolate cake adorned with delicate spun sugar flowers and shimmering flakes of gold leaf. Only one perfect slice remained on the silver platter. As Marcus and Lily approached, a harried-looking waiter balancing a precarious tray of coffee cups stumbled. Time seemed to slow. Leo watched in horror as the waiter lurched, his arm knocking against the table. The single perfect slice of cake slid from its platter, tumbling through the air for a heart-stopping second before landing with a soft thud on the polished marble floor. A gasp caught in Leo's throat. The waiter froze, his face paling. He darted a panicked look around the room. No one seemed to have noticed. The orchestra swelled, the chatter of the crowd was loud, and all eyes were on the dance floor. With a movement so swift it was almost a blur, the waiter bent down, scooped up the slice of cake, and placed it back on the platter, quickly turning it so the side that had hit the floor was hidden. He smoothed the icing with his thumb and scurried away, his relief palpable. Total silence. Leo's heart pounded against his ribs. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. Just then, Marcus and Lily arrived at the table. "Here we are, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice gentle. "The last piece of the big chocolate one. It looks like it was waiting just for you." Lily's face broke into a radiant smile. She lifted her hands, her delicate fingers reaching out to where her father's voice guided her. She was about to touch the contaminated cake. Leo's mind raced. He was starving. If he said nothing, the girl would take the dirty cake, and maybe, just maybe, he could ask for a different piece later. If he spoke up, he would draw attention. He would be seen. The manager, a severe-looking woman he'd seen berating a busboy earlier, would surely throw him out. He would get his aunt in trouble. A wave of biting cold fear washed over him, but then he saw the girl's innocent, trusting smile. He saw the profound love in her father's haunted eyes. He thought of his own mother, who had always told him that kindness was a choice, and the right choice was rarely the easy one. His hesitation vanished, replaced by a quiet, unwavering resolve. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows. He moved quickly, placing himself between Lily and the table. He looked at her, then at her father, his own eyes wide and sincere. He spoke in a low, urgent whisper. "Don't eat the cake." Marcus stiffened, his hand instinctively tightening on his daughter's shoulder. His eyes, which had been soft with affection, narrowed into commanding points of focus, locking onto the small, threadbare boy in front of him. A dozen cynical, world-weary assumptions flooded his mind, a beggar, a grifter, a street urchin, trying to cause a scene. He was about to utter a sharp, dismissive word to make the boy vanish to protect the fragile bubble of normalcy he so desperately tried to create for his daughter. But then he saw the boy's eyes. They were not shifty or demanding. They were steady, unflinching, and filled with a desperate earnestness that was utterly disarming. They were the eyes of someone telling a difficult truth. "What did you say?" Marcus asked, his voice low and dangerous, a quiet rumble that could quell boardrooms. Leo didn't flinch. He gestured with a slight nod of his head toward the platter, keeping his voice down so only Marcus could hear. "It fell, sir, on the floor. The waiter." He dropped it and put it back. Leo's gaze flickered to Lily, who stood patiently, her head tilted as if trying to decipher the unspoken tension in the air. "I didn't want her to eat it. It's dirty." The words were simple, delivered without embellishment. They held the unmistakable ring of truth. A profound silence fell between them, a pocket of stillness in the swirling ballroom. In that moment, for Marcus Thorne, the world shifted on its axis. For years since his wife's death, Marcus had moved through life as if behind a thick pane of glass. He managed his global empire with ruthless efficiency, his heart encased in a layer of grief and cynicism as cold and hard as polished marble. The world, to him, had become a transactional place, a series of calculated moves and shallow interactions. People wanted something from him, his money, his power, his influence. Genuine, selfless kindness was a myth, a fairy tale he no longer believed in. Yet here, in the middle of a garish party he'd only attended to appease a board member, was this child. This fragile, hungry-looking boy, who by all rights should have been thinking only of his own empty stomach, had chosen to protect a stranger. He had risked punishment and humiliation, not for a reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. It was an act of such pure, uncalculated decency that it cracked the icy shell around Marcus's heart. It was a seismic shock, a reminder that innocence still existed. It was a light in his long, dark tunnel. He saw the slight tremble in Leo's hands, the worn collar of his thin jacket. He understood with a clarity that struck him like lightning the personal cost of the boy's warning. He had nothing, yet he had given something invaluable, his integrity. Marcus stared at the boy, truly seeing him for the first time. He saw not a street urchin, but a soul of immense quiet strength. Awe and intrigue began to chase away the cynicism. A new, unfamiliar feeling began to stir in his chest. A renewed purpose. He had to know who this boy was. He had to repay this sacred debt. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Thank you," he said, the two words imbued with a weight that Leo could not possibly comprehend. Marcus gently steered Lily away from the table. "It seems that cake isn't for us, after all, my love. Let's find you some ice cream instead." As they walked away, Leo retreated back into the comforting anonymity of the shadows, his heart thudding wildly. He thought the encounter was over. He had no idea it was just the beginning. The brief moment of connection was shattered by a sharp, grating voice. "And just what do you think you're doing?" A woman with a severely pinned-up bun and a face pinched with impatience loomed over him. It was Mrs. Deidre Vance, the catering manager, her eyes like chips of ice. She had seen Leo approach the well-dressed man and his daughter, and her mind, steeped in elitism, had jumped to the only conclusion it could. He was a pest, a beggar harassing the esteemed guests. She grabbed Leo's arm, her fingers digging into his thin bicep like claws. "I know your kind, sneaking in where you don't belong, bothering people for handouts." Leo winced, the grip surprisingly strong. He tried to pull away, his face flushed with a mixture of fear and shame. "No, I wasn't. I was just—" he faltered, the words dying in his throat. How could he explain without sounding like he was lying or making things worse? He was just a boy. She was a figure of immense, terrifying authority. "You were just what?" she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "Trying to steal silverware? Or maybe a guest's wallet?" Her accusation was loud enough to draw the attention of several nearby guests, who now stared with expressions ranging from mild curiosity to open disdain. The warmth of the room suddenly felt suffocating. Just then a frantic-looking woman in a simple cleaner's uniform rushed over, a cloth still in her hand. It was Aunt Maria. Her face, already etched with weariness, became a mask of pure panic when she saw Leo in Mrs. Vance's grasp. "Oh, Mrs. Vance, I am so sorry. He was supposed to wait for me. He's my nephew. He meant no harm, I swear," Maria pleaded, her voice trembling. "Mrs." Vance released Leo's arm with a contemptuous shove, turning her fury on Maria. "Your nephew? You brought this street rat into my event? Do you have any idea the caliber of clientele we have here tonight?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "This is a direct violation of your employment agreement. I could have you fired for this. In fact, I think I will." A wave of unbearable despair washed over Leo. He had tried to do something good, and in doing so, he had brought ruin upon the one person he loved most in the world. His aunt's job, their tiny apartment, their fragile stability, it was all about to be swept away because of him. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and shameful. "I'm sorry, Aunt Maria," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." From across the room, hidden by a decorative screen, Marcus Thorne watched the entire ugly scene unfold. His jaw was clenched so tightly a muscle jumped in his cheek. He had seen the manager accost the boy and had started to move, but then the aunt had appeared. He had held back, observing, gathering information. Every cruel word from Mrs. Vance, every pleading look from the aunt, every tear that streaked down Leo's pale face was fuel to a fire now roaring inside him. The quiet awe he had felt for the boy had transformed into a fiercely protective rage. This injustice would not stand. He now had a name for his renewed purpose. It was vengeance, and it was salvation. Mrs. Vance pointed a long, manicured finger toward the service exit. "Get out, both of you, and don't bother coming back tomorrow." Maria, her shoulders slumped in defeat, took Leo's hand and led him away, a shattered woman towing a shattered boy. They were swallowed by the shadows of the service corridor, leaving the glittering party behind. They were gone. The days that followed were steeped in a heavy fog of anxiety. Aunt Maria, true to Mrs. Vance's word, was fired. She spent her days on the phone and pounding the pavement, searching for a new job, any job, but the market was unforgiving. Her quiet optimism began to fray, replaced by a brittle, unspoken fear that haunted the small apartment. The eviction notice they had been dreading finally arrived, a stark white paper taped to their door that felt like a death sentence. Maria held it with trembling hands, her face gaunt and pale under the flickering light of their single kitchen bulb. Leo watched her, a hollow ache in his chest so vast it felt like it might consume him. This was his fault. The weight of his guilt was a physical burden pressing down on his small shoulders. He retreated further into himself, the memory of his one brave act now tainted with the bitter taste of failure. He didn't know that from a sleek, gleaming skyscraper downtown, a powerful guardian angel was watching over him. Marcus Thorne, a man who could move markets with a single phone call, was now focusing his immense resources on the life of one small boy. His private investigators had compiled a complete dossier within hours. Leo Ramirez, orphaned, living with his maternal aunt, Maria Ramirez. Their address, their financial struggles, their impending eviction. Marcus read the report in his cavernous, sterile office, the city lights twinkling like a distant galaxy below. The sterile silence of the room was broken only by the soft click of his pen as he set it down. His course of action was clear. He would not just help, he would restore, he would erase their hardship without revealing his hand. Not yet. The intervention began like a series of quiet miracles. One morning, Maria went to the landlord's office, ready to beg for an extension she knew she wouldn't get. She returned hours later, her face a mask of stunned disbelief. She held a receipt in her hand, her knuckles white. "Leo," she whispered, her voice cracking, "the rent, it's paid, not just for this month, for the entire year." Leo stared at her, then at the crisp piece of paper. It was impossible. Maria said the landlord had no explanation, only that an anonymous wire transfer had arrived from a benefactor's fund. They stood in the middle of their small living room, wrapped in a dizzying mix of relief and confusion. It felt like a dream. 2 days later, a large unmarked cardboard box appeared on their doorstep. Inside were brand-new clothes for both of them. For Leo, there were sturdy, waterproof boots, warm sweaters in soft wool, and jeans that weren't worn thin at the knees. For Maria, there were practical, professional outfits suitable for job interviews. There was no note, no indication of who had sent it. Leo ran his hand over the soft fabric of a new coat, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the wool. It was the warmth of being cared for. The next week, the miracles continued. An email arrived for Maria from a prestigious hospitality group, a direct competitor to Mrs. Vance's company, offering her an interview for a management position. She was baffled. She had never even applied. The interview was a formality. They offered her the job on the spot at double her previous salary with full benefits. The offer was so good, so far beyond her wildest hopes, that she cried, tears of cathartic release washing away weeks of fear. That same week, a premium grocery delivery service began arriving at their door every Tuesday, the boxes filled with fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, and even treats, chocolates, and a small carton of the expensive ice cream Leo loved. Their cupboards, once bare, were now full. Their life, once so fragile and desperate, was suddenly secure. Maria attributed it all to divine providence, to prayers answered after years of struggle. But Leo, in the quiet of his room, held on to a single threadbare memory: the haunted, intense eyes of the man in the dark sweater. He couldn't explain the connection. It was just a feeling, a faint, illogical hum of possibility. He didn't know that the man, Marcus Thorne, was orchestrating every detail, his actions a silent, powerful promise to the boy who had shown him what purity looked like. Marcus was rebuilding Leo's world, piece by piece, laying a new foundation of security and hope before he ever showed his face again. He was waiting for the right moment to step out of the shadows, not just as a benefactor, but as a friend. Marcus knew from his investigators' reports that Leo spent his afternoons after school in a small, quiet park a few blocks from his apartment. It was a simple place with a few worn benches and a large oak tree whose branches reached out like welcoming arms. It was there that Marcus decided their worlds should formally collide again. One crisp autumn afternoon, he took Lily to the park, her hand tucked securely in his. The air was filled with the scent of dry leaves and the distant laughter of children. They walked along the gravel path, Marcus's gaze sweeping the area until he saw him. Leo was sitting on a bench under the great oak, a book open on his lap, though he wasn't reading. He was staring into the distance, his expression thoughtful and distant. He looked different now. The hollows in his cheeks had filled out, and he was wearing one of the new warm sweaters. He looked healthier, less fragile, but the quiet solitude was still there. As they drew closer, Lily, whose hearing was exceptionally acute, suddenly stopped. She tilted her head. "Papa," she whispered, a note of curiosity in her voice. "That voice, I know it." Before Marcus could respond, she called out, "Hello?" Leo looked up, startled. His eyes widened in recognition as he saw the girl with the violet eyes and her tall, serious father approaching. A faint blush rose on his cheeks. "Hi," he said, his voice barely audible. "It's you," Lily said, a bright smile dawning on her face. "The boy from the party, the cake boy." Marcus chuckled softly, a sound so rare it felt momentous. "He has a name, Lily. This is Leo." He sat down on the bench, leaving a space between himself and Leo, giving the boy room. "It's good to see you again, Leo." Leo nodded, still overwhelmed. "You too, sir." The confession scene began not with words, but with a comfortable silence. They sat together on the park bench, a quiet, safe space under the amber hue of the autumn leaves. Marcus didn't press or pry. He simply existed in the space with Leo, allowing the boy's natural shyness to recede. It was Lily who broke the ice, asking Leo about the book he was reading, about his school, about the big oak tree. Leo, charmed by her open and gentle nature, began to talk. He spoke about his love for stories, for escaping into worlds of adventure and magic. Marcus listened, his unwavering gaze fixed on the boy. He saw the intelligence and sensitivity that lay beneath the quiet exterior. After a while he spoke, his voice soft. "Lily told me she thought you were a hero that night," he said. "I agree with her." Leo looked down at his hands, embarrassed. "I didn't do anything." "You did everything," Marcus countered gently. "You chose to be kind when it would have been easier to be silent. That takes a special kind of strength." He paused, then asked a question that seemed to come from nowhere. "Tell me about your parents, Leo." The question was so direct yet so gentle that it bypassed all of Leo's defenses. He looked up, surprised, but saw only sincere interest in the man's eyes. And so, for the first time, to a near stranger, he spoke of them. He talked about his mother's warm laugh and the way she smelled of cinnamon. He talked about his father's strong hands and the silly songs he used to sing. And then he spoke of the accident, the raw, aching wound that had never truly healed. He described the hollow feeling of walking into their empty apartment, the crushing weight of a world that had suddenly lost its center. He spoke not with self-pity, but with the simple, heartbreaking honesty of a child grappling with an unbearable loss. He confessed the guilt he felt over his aunt's struggles, the feeling that he was a burden. As he spoke, Marcus listened with a steady, profound stillness. He didn't offer empty platitudes or trite reassurances. He simply listened, his presence a solid, comforting anchor in the turbulent sea of Leo's grief. He made the boy feel for the first time in a long time, completely and utterly seen. When Leo finished, his voice thick with unspoken emotion, Marcus didn't immediately respond with words. He stood up, walked to a small vendor cart at the edge of the park, and returned with 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate, handing one to Leo, a simple grounding gesture. Then Marcus shared a piece of his own shattered heart. "My wife," he began, his voice taking on a rough, strained quality. "Lily's mother, her name was Elena. She was the light of my life." He stared out at the park, but his eyes were seeing a different time, a different place. "She died 3 years ago, a sudden illness. One day she was here, and the next, she was gone." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "After she vanished, the world lost its color. I built walls around my heart, around my daughter. I saw betrayal and self-interest everywhere I looked. The world became a cold, transactional place." He turned his gaze back to Leo, and the boy saw a flash of the raw pain he'd witnessed at the gala, but this time it was tempered with something else: gratitude. "That night at the party," Marcus continued, his voice low and intense, "when I saw you, this small boy with nothing, willing to risk trouble to protect my daughter from something as small as a dirty piece of cake, it was like the first ray of sunlight after a long, dark winter. It reminded me that goodness, pure, selfless goodness, still exists. You didn't just protect my daughter, Leo, you reminded me how to hope." A bond was forged on that park bench, an unspoken connection woven from the threads of shared grief and mutual respect. It was a profound, cathartic moment of 2 lonely souls finding a kindred spirit. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grass, Marcus placed a gentle, firm hand on Leo's shoulder. The contact was warm and steady. "You have a good heart, Leo Ramirez," he said, his voice filled with a quiet conviction. "Never let the world convince you to lose that. It is your greatest treasure." He had one more wrong to right, one more dragon to slay on Leo's behalf. The public humiliation Leo and his aunt had suffered needed a public redemption, and Marcus Thorne was just the man to orchestrate it. The final piece of Marcus's plan was set into motion. He learned that the hospitality group that had hired Maria was holding its annual industry awards ceremony in the grand ballroom of the very same hotel where she had been so cruelly dismissed. The catering for this prestigious event was, by a twist of delicious irony, being handled by Mrs. Deidre Vance's company. It was the perfect stage. Marcus used his considerable influence to ensure Maria Ramirez was slated to receive a special Excellence in Service award, a genuine honor for her incredible work in her new role, but also the bait for his trap. He arranged for 2 VIP invitations to be sent to her address, for herself and her nephew, Leo. When the ornate envelope arrived, Maria was overwhelmed with joy. For her, it was the ultimate validation after a lifetime of hard work. For Leo, it was a source of deep anxiety. The thought of returning to that place, the scene of their deepest humiliation, made his stomach churn. But seeing the pride in his aunt's eyes, he couldn't refuse. He would face it for her. They arrived at the gala looking transformed. Maria was elegant in a simple but beautifully cut dark blue dress. Leo, in a crisp new suit that Marcus had anonymously sent, looked like a different boy. He stood taller, the quiet dignity that had always been there now shining through. But as they stepped onto the polished marble floor of the grand atrium, the memory of Mrs. Vance's cruel words echoed in his ears. He felt a familiar biting cold despite the warmth of the room. They found their assigned table near the front, and for a while things were peaceful. But then a shadow fell over them. It was Mrs. Deidre Vance. She was overseeing the event, her face a mask of professional stress. But when her eyes landed on Maria and Leo, her expression curdled into pure, unadulterated venom. She saw them not as invited guests, but as impostors, a personal affront to her authority and the exclusivity of her event. Her professional jealousy and deep-seated elitism boiled over. She strode toward their table, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble. "Well, well," she began, her voice loud enough to turn heads. "Look what the cat dragged in. I thought I told you to never show your faces here again." Maria's face went pale. "Mrs. Vance, we were invited. I'm here to receive an award." Mrs. Vance let out a short, incredulous laugh. "An award? You? That's rich. Let me guess. You blackmailed someone to get in here? Or did your little street rat of a nephew pickpocket an invitation?" The accusation was vile, designed for maximum public humiliation. People at nearby tables stopped talking, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. "Get this street trash out of my event!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury as she signaled for security. Leo, seeing his aunt's trembling lip and shattered expression, stood up. He was terrified, his heart pounding like a drum, but a protective fire ignited within him. "Leave her alone," he said, his voice small but steady. "We belong here." But his defiance only enraged Mrs. Vance further. "You belong in the gutter," she hissed, her face contorted with rage. Two large security guards began to advance on their table. Humiliation washed over Leo. It was happening all over again. He had failed. Just as the guards reached their table, a voice, calm but imbued with absolute power, cut through the tense silence. "That will be enough." The voice echoed through the cavernous hall, amplified by the microphone system. Every head turned toward the stage. There, bathed in the golden glow of the spotlight, stood Marcus Thorne. He was not the casually dressed man from the park. He was the titan of industry, dressed in an impeccable, custom-tailored suit that radiated power. He was the hidden king revealing his crown. A wave of gasps and whispers swept through the room as people recognized him. Marcus Thorne never attended these events. His presence was a seismic event in itself. "Mrs." Vance froze, her jaw slack with shock. Marcus's commanding gaze swept over the crowd before landing on her, his eyes as cold and hard as diamonds. He began to speak, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "For those of you who do not know me, my name is Marcus Thorne." Another murmur rippled through the audience. He continued, "I was hoping for a pleasant evening, but it seems I must first address a profound injustice." He looked directly at Leo, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. "Several weeks ago, at a party in this very room, I witnessed an extraordinary act of integrity. A young boy," he gestured to Leo, "at great personal risk, protected my blind daughter from consuming food that had been contaminated and carelessly put back on a buffet by a member of the staff." He let that sink in. That boy asked for nothing in return. He acted from a place of pure, selfless decency. His gaze snapped back to Mrs. Vance, and the warmth vanished, replaced by an arctic chill. I also witnessed what happened next. This woman, Mrs. Deidre Vance, rather than inquiring about the situation, chose to publicly humiliate that boy and his hard-working guardian. She accused them of theft, called them names I will not repeat, and had them cruelly thrown out, costing Ms. Maria Ramirez her job. He paused, the silence in the room absolute. I have since obtained a sworn confession from the waiter who dropped the cake. He confirmed every detail of the boy's story. Marcus's voice grew stronger, filled with an unwavering moral authority. This boy, he declared, his voice thundering through the hall, has more integrity, more honor, and more character in his little finger than you, Mrs. Vance, have shown in your entire career. He is not street trash. He is my guest. He is my hero. With that, he turned to Leo. And to honor that integrity, my foundation is awarding Leo Ramirez the first ever Thorne Legacy Scholarship, a full academic scholarship that will cover his entire education, from this day through to any university in the world he chooses. A wave of applause erupted through the room. Leo stared, his mind reeling in disbelief, tears of shock and gratitude streaming down his face. Marcus held up a hand for silence. He had one last thing to say. He looked at the shattered, pale face of Mrs. Vance. "And as for you, Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice dropping to a lethally quiet tone, "effective immediately, the Thorne Corporation and all of its subsidiary companies will be severing every contract with your catering firm, a portfolio valued at approximately $50 million a year. We do not do business with those who lack basic human decency." The finality of his words was absolute. The power dynamic had not just been reversed, it had been obliterated. Mrs. Vance stood there, speechless and broken, a pariah in the very room where she had once reigned as queen. Salvation was complete. In the aftermath of the stunning public vindication, the rest of the evening passed in a blur for Leo and Maria. Guests who moments before had looked at them with suspicion now approached them with wide smiles and outstretched hands, offering congratulations. The award ceremony proceeded, and when Maria's name was called, the applause was thunderous. She walked to the stage, her steps sure and steady, and accepted her award with a grace and dignity that brought tears to Leo's eyes. Marcus watched it all from the side, a quiet guardian ensuring their night of triumph was uninterrupted. When the formalities were over, he approached their table. The imposing billionaire was gone, replaced once again by the gentle man from the park. "Maria, Leo," he began, his voice warm, "I hope this evening has, in some small way, righted the wrong that was done to you." Maria, her eyes glistening, could only nod, her heart too full for words. It was Leo who spoke. "You did all of it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice soft with dawning realization. "The rent, the clothes, my aunt's job?" Marcus didn't deny it. He simply met the boy's gaze. "An act of kindness like yours deserves a response," he said. "The world needs to be reminded that goodness is rewarded." In that moment, the transactional nature of their relationship, benefactor and recipient, melted away, leaving something far more profound in its place. It was the beginning of a family. In the weeks that followed, Marcus became a steady presence in their lives. He would visit their apartment, not as a billionaire, but as a friend, bringing Lily with him. The two children, one who saw the world with his heart and one who saw it with her other senses, formed an inseparable bond. Their laughter began to fill the small apartment, chasing away the last of the shadows. Marcus and Maria developed a deep, respectful friendship, two single guardians united by their love for their children. The resolution was not a grand, dramatic gesture, but a series of quiet, heartfelt conversations. One evening, as Leo and Lily worked on a Braille storybook at the kitchen table, Marcus asked to speak with Maria privately in the living room. "Maria," he started, his tone serious but gentle, "I have a cavernous house that has been silent for too long, and I have a daughter who adores your nephew, and I have come to care for him as if he were my own son." He looked at her, his usual commanding presence replaced by a touching vulnerability. "I would never dream of taking him from you. You are his anchor. But I want to offer you all a different life, a life without struggle. My home is large enough for all of us. I want to help you raise him. I want us to be a family." Maria listened, tears welling in her eyes. It was not a proposition of charity, but an invitation into a shared life, a merging of two incomplete families into one whole. She thought of the years of struggle, of the constant fear, and then she looked at Leo, laughing with Lily, his face bright, with a happiness she hadn't seen since before his parents were lost. Her answer was simple and sure. Yes, the romantic fulfillment was not between a man and a woman, but in the creation of a loving, stable home. The love was the profound, undeniable love of a found family, a sanctuary built on a foundation of kindness, respect, and shared healing. Marcus Thorne, the man who had everything, had finally found the one thing his money could not buy, a reason for his heart to beat again. And Leo Ramirez, the boy who had nothing, had given a gift that had saved them all, and in return had been given the one thing he craved most, a place to belong. He had a father, he had a sister, he was home. 1 year later. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow through the towering arched windows of a magnificent library. The light illuminated swirling dust motes that danced in the air like tiny fairies and fell across shelves packed with thousands of leather-bound books. The air smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and contentment. The sterile silence that had once defined Marcus Thorne's stately mansion was gone, replaced by a soft hush of happy activity. On a large plush rug in the center of the room sat Leo and Lily. Leo, no longer the gaunt, fragile boy from the gala, was now a healthy, confident young man, his face full of life. He was patiently guiding Lily's fingers across the raised dots of a new Braille adventure story, his voice a low, excited murmur as he described the illustrations in the book. "And here," he said, "the dragon has scales that shimmer like 1,000 green jewels." Lily listened, enraptured, her face turned up toward his voice, a smile of pure delight on her lips. At a large, polished mahogany desk, Marcus sat, pretending to read a financial report. In truth, he hadn't seen a single word on the page. His gaze was fixed on the two children, a tender, unwavering smile on his face. The hollow, haunted look that had shadowed his eyes for years had vanished completely, replaced by a deep, abiding warmth. He looked at Leo, the boy who had saved him from his own cynicism, and felt a surge of paternal love so powerful it was a physical presence in his chest. He looked at Lily, his precious daughter, who was no longer living in a bubble of overprotection, but was thriving, her world expanded by the friendship and love of her new brother. The quiet chuckle that escaped his lips was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. This was his life now. This was his family. The quiet click of the library door opening broke the peaceful scene. Aunt Maria entered, carrying a tray with 3 glasses of lemonade and a plate of cookies. She was no longer a weary cleaner, but the head of guest relations for one of Marcus's luxury hotel chains, a role she excelled at. But her most important role was here, as the beloved aunt and maternal heart of their unconventional family. She set the tray down, her eyes full of the same tender love that was in Marcus's. They were a team, a partnership built on mutual respect and a shared devotion to the children. Their home was not defined by blood, but by a bond forged in a moment of selfless kindness. It was a testament to the fact that the most beautiful families are often the ones we build ourselves. The pounding rain of a desperate night had given way to the golden glow of a peaceful afternoon. The despair had transformed into hope. The shattered pieces had been reassembled into something stronger and more beautiful than before. They were happy. They were whole. They were safe. This story is a powerful reminder that we never know the impact a single act of kindness can have. For Leo, a simple warning, born from a pure and selfless heart, was a stone tossed into a silent lake. The ripples from that one small act spread outward, transforming not only his own life and the life of his aunt, but also healing the shattered heart of a lonely man and bringing light into a young girl's world. It's a fable of modern times, showing that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in integrity, and that the most profound connections are forged not in boardrooms, but in moments of shared vulnerability and quiet compassion. Leo's courage and Marcus's willingness to have his heart reawakened created a new family, a testament to the idea that love and goodness are the most powerful forces for change in the universe. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the goodness that exists in the world, please let it be more than just a fleeting feeling. Let it be an inspiration. We all have the power to be a Leo or a Marcus in someone's life. We can choose kindness when it's difficult, and we can choose to see the good in others, even when we feel cynical. Your one small act could be the miracle someone else is desperately praying for. We invite you to keep that feeling alive. Please like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales for more soul-stirring stories that celebrate the incredible power of the human heart. Every story is a journey, and we have so many more inspiring tales of love, redemption, and hope to share with you. We'll see you in the next one.